Okay, Mina, we're live. Thank you for joining. It's been a very long time, but it's really good to see you again.
Nice to see you, Reza. Thanks for having me. It's such a great pleasure, and it's good to be doing this with a familiar face since I know since what you were like 7 years old. I don't know how old were you when we first met? You were probably
I
seven.
think when we first met, I was probably like 7 or 8. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's good to reconnect with a familiar face. I'm usually in Canada, ولی خب now I'm in the UK. I'm living in London, UK, but thank you so much for accommodating the time zone difference.
Of course, yeah. Hope to see you in Canada soon.
Hopefully.
Also, the point of this is really to, have some more insightful, deeper conversations, ask some meaningful questions, and kind of dig deeper, understand each other more. So I'll start with the first one. I wanted to know, what's your favorite movie and why?
When I first thought about my favorite movie, I thought about the movie I watched the most and the one I've told everyone to watch the most. And it's something that's become like an obsession of mine, and for no good reason. And it's Slumdog Millionaire. And it's not a new movie. It didn't come out like recently, but I love the whole sort of the storyline, and Danny Boyle did such a good job directing the film. And why I love it specifically, because it shows you how every small interaction in your life, if you've watched the movie, if anyone has watched the movie, they'll know that every small interaction in your life kind of has a connection to something larger. And it's kind of like when Steve Jobs says, like, the dots will connect. Sometimes when you're going through your everyday life, or you meet someone or something happens and you are frustrated with it, you have to kind of remind yourself, oh, there's a reason for why this is happening. And I'm not saying I'm going to go on a game show and know the exact answer to the question, to the $1 million question, and suddenly turn my life around and become a millionaire, which is basically the premise of the show. But it's just a beautiful film. I have an immense appreciation for Indian culture and Indian cinema, and just the colors and the diversity within India. And that's what the film shows. And I just love it.
Interesting. And you said, everything happens for a reason and the dots connect. So when you said that, I haven't watched the movie, but what came to mind is like the butterfly effect. You do something small, and then down the road, it can have tremendous impacts, no matter, that's kind of like the butterfly effect. That's interesting. So,
have you watched the movie The Butterfly Effect? It's that the one with Kevin Costner, right?
No, I haven't watched that movie, but like the butterfly effect is basically like when, you do something, and then down the road, specific decisions that you make can really change the path that you take in life, or the things that happen to you, right?
Right.
So it kind of reminded me of that, but that's interesting. I should watch the movie Slumdog Millionaire and Butterfly Effect.
I really recommend it. It's one of those movies, I think I've watched it like 9 to 10 times, and I feel like speaking about it, I'm like, oh, I just want to watch it again. The music it's done by A.R. Rahman, and like the direction, and it's just everything when it comes together, it's just a really, really an amazing piece of art.
Cool, interesting. All right, so if you were to recommend a book to a friend or a loved one, what would you recommend? Something that, has touched you as well.
The book I'd recommend would be something that's very practical. I use it in my everyday life and in my work. I work with an international team, and the book that was recommended for me to read, leading an international team, was The Culture Map by Erin Myers. And it's basically a book that tells you how people communicate across different cultures, how they respond to leadership, how they respond to authority, how they respond to criticism. And working in an international team, you're able to notice the subtle differences. It teaches you about low context and high context languages, which obviously, as someone who speaks both, you know, English and Farsi and a few other languages, I'm able to notice how Farsi, for example, is a very high context language, which means like you say a lot of things without saying, whereas American English, not even British English, American English is very, very low context. So you have to be very literal in everything you say. And some people will get offended if you start saying things in a literal way, if they don't understand that you're actually a person from a low context background versus a person from a high context background. And I think especially in business and in relationships and intercultural relationships, even with our own parents, who are more from a high context background, it helps you how to navigate those worlds.
That's really cool. That's really interesting, because I've seen this like personally affect me in my life, where I'm communicating in English, and you know, sometimes I'm not like that direct in certain situations because I automatically assume the other person gets it, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like you gotta be more direct. So it's good. It's a good example of that, like high context, low context.
Versus if you were with your parents and you were trying to speak to them the way you would with your Canadian colleagues, they would probably get offended. They're like, you don't need to say that so little, like, we get it. Like, you don't need to, don't assume I'm dumb. And you're like, no, I was just explaining this to you. So
that's interesting. So cultural map.
The Culture Map by Erin Myers. Yeah. It's a bright yellow book and it's got the world map on it. And it places all the countries in different languages in this different sort of spectrum, and it provides like real world case studies of business and business scenarios in different cases, and she writes with great humor, so I really recommend it.
Interesting. And you know, quick question off of that. So do you think right now cultures are starting to merge and become kind of similar because of obviously globalization, because of, you know, social media and how everyone is really connected? So every country is less immersed in their particular culture and more like a global culture that's emerging.
I agree with you to a certain extent, but I also believe that it's kind of like a buffet style where people pick and choose what they like and what they don't like. I look at myself, you know, lived in multiple countries, and there's certain aspects that I really admire and I like, and there's certain aspects of certain cultures that I'm like, oh, maybe that's not for me, or I prefer this way of doing things. So I think that especially maybe North American culture is very sort of very strong because of this Americanization, and we've got sort of Netflix and Amazon Prime and all these shows that we're watching in YouTube, and a lot of them we're watching things from American creators or North American creators. But I also do think that in the similar vein, there are culture and there are other aspects that people are not willing to let go of, that they will try to integrate into their lives by having cultural groups or events or shows that are specifically showing a certain culture. And hopefully we'll come to a point maybe of a globalization where everyone knows, you know, how like there's this book that talks about Hygge, which is this like Scandinavian way of living and happiness. And that's because it's part of Scandinavian culture, but now that has been implemented in North American culture. And maybe there's a culture of food in India that has been now brought into North American culture. So maybe having like a tapestry, woven tapestry of all the cultures, but everyone kind of knows about it.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, no,
that's what I'm hoping for. Not everything to become like a melting pot, but to have them
layered on
have
top
enough education. You know, like, so for example, the concept of going Dutch when you go out for dinner, it means when you split the bill, you're like, oh, do you want to go Dutch? So that's something that's very well known. And then everyone kind of knows that, oh, this is the Dutch way of doing things. Not one person takes the check. Whereas like if you were in the Middle East, people would fight for the check and they'd want to pay for it. So it's it's fine. It's educating yourself about the culture and then like choosing to follow it.
Yeah, I like how you said buffet style as well, because when you understand different cultures as well, then you can kind of like mix and match them based on what you want them to be, right? Or what your perspective is. Okay, that's cool. So, what is your current Ikigai?
Ikigai.
And
The Japanese.
I say current because in different phases, you know, you obviously have different things. You don't stick with one for the rest of your life. I mean, you can, but it doesn't usually happen that way, you know?
Right. So looking at the Japanese term Ikigai, the reason for being. I think previously, my most previous Ikigai was to make sure I'm having the most amount of impact on the people around me, and making sure that if I die tomorrow, I've done enough good in this world. So I previous to to my current life right now, I was doing a lot of volunteer work, a lot of humanitarian work, and literally not leaving a single penny for myself, and making sure that I was living a life full of meaning and a life of selflessness. What did end up happening, however, was that I ended up burning out, and I ended up with very little money in my bank. And then I realized I had all the student loan to pay and student debt that I had to repay back from my education, for my bachelor's and my master's. And although it was great, and I was, spiritually and sort of emotionally fulfilled that I was able to go and do these great projects and really, live a life of service, I realized that physically my body was really, really burnt out. And also I suffered some sort of like psychological trauma because of like the things that I was seeing. And then my mom actually, I was living in Greece at that time, and my mom came to me and said, what did she say? She said, you need to put on your own oxygen mask first before you help others. And that's what they tell you in the plane.
Mm-hmm.
And to make my answer short to you, because I know I went on this long-winded.
Oh, you're good.
Context.
I'm following.
Right now, my Ikigai is to be financially stable, to pay off, to live my life independent, and to take care of myself first before I take care of others. For a very long time, I had forgotten that, or I had put myself as secondary, and it wasn't very healthy. So my current Ikigai is to take care of my health, take care of my financial health, and then be able to take care of those around me.
That's a very wholesome and full circle Ikigai experience.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Interesting. And I know that you actually did, go to a lot of places, visit a lot of different countries, and do a lot of interesting work. And I can kind of see why you burnt out. But I mean, it makes sense. Your mom is absolutely right to say you got to water, your own plant first, so you can have that shade to provide for other people, right? Interesting. So what new skills are you trying to learn right now?
I would say the skill of, as of right now, the skill of having a second source of income. That's like one thing that I'm actually thinking about, because it's great. While I'm very grateful to have, my job, and that's able to provide for me, pay rent for me, buy food for me, I feel like the world is changing, and I, starting to, if I want to have a family, I might not be able to work. So having that, everyone is talking about, like every YouTube video you watch, there's like this, oh, let me show you how you can turn your life into $1 million. And I think that the skill that I would love to learn is to find a way to generate passive income. And that could be through content media creation, that could be through consulting. But consulting is something that you exchange your time for money. I'd like to create something where
scalable.
Exactly, something scalable, passive income. You invest your time, energy, efforts, and your sort of innovation into it once, and then you can kind of maintain it moving forward, rather than I don't want to be a hamster in the wheel, and that exhausts me. I feel like if I had that passive income, then I could then do more good by having that impact, going back to my old life and doing more, being of more service to others rather than, yeah, just constantly exchanging my time for money.
That's a good point, because you know, when you do have that passive income coming in, then you have that freedom of mind to be more creative as well.
Right.
Because when you're always looking to make ends meet, then it's hard to, you know, kick in that creativity into your everyday life, right? So that's definitely important. And you know, with all of these tools that we have on our hands now, freelancing, doing consulting, there's so many different things that we can do. So that's definitely like important. And then another thing, with a good friend, we were talking about this. Right now we're kicking back into a renaissance age again, where people don't just do one thing. You know, we're not supposed to put labels on ourselves. Okay, I am a consultant, that's only what I'm going to do. There's so many other things you can do on the side, like different projects, different side hustles, etc. So anyways.
Exactly. There's nothing that stops you right now. And I always tell myself, I say, thank God my parents are healthy, that I don't, you know, I don't need to be taking care of them. I don't have any dependents myself. I don't have children right now that I need to take care of. I have no excuse. I'm healthy. I have no excuse to not be using the 24 hours that I've been given. So it's literally, you just have to do it.
Definitely.
No excuses.
No excuses. Yeah. And like you said, you know, we have all the time right now, so we might as well make use of it, right?
Yeah.
So what's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear would be not being able to be independent. And that could be financially independent, that could be physically independent, that could be emotionally independent. I think depending on other people scares me, and it cripples me, and it suffocates me. And I fear for a time where I would be so sick that I would have to ask others to bring me water or bring me food, or, you know, take care of me. And I always dream and I hope and I wish that, you know, if I ever, like, I really want, it's a sort of dark thing to say, but I'd rather die than have other people like take care of me.
You don't want to be a burden.
I don't want to be, yeah, it's just, I don't like asking for help. That's maybe one thing. And I just don't want to stifle anyone's life and anyone's routine and their, you know, I don't want to have children so that one day they can take care of me. No, I'm bringing children because they're their own people and they're going to contribute to society in their own way. I don't want them to take care of me. So yeah, my biggest fear would be losing my independence in every sense. It could be, like, as I said, it could be for like meals, it could be financial independence, or even emotional independence, where like you constantly feel like you need someone to make you happy. And I don't like that idea.
Yeah, that definitely affects your self-esteem as well, you know? It's tough on the self-esteem too. You don't want that. So then to that point, how do you deal with your insecurities?
I watch a lot of The School of Life on YouTube, and I recommend it to everyone. It's these series of animated series with a lot of psychological findings and theories explained in a simple language. And you realize that everyone is a vulnerable child that needs to be loved and cared for. We're all in adult shapes, and we all have different costumes, but deep down we're all children that still have the same needs. We still get hungry, we still get angry, we get sad. Realizing that I'm not the only one with insecurities, and there's always a spectrum. There's always going to be someone ahead of you, and you're going to be ahead of someone else, and just taking a step back and realizing that you're not the center of your own world, and you're part of this bigger, larger mosaic. And I think about them for a little bit, and then I go on YouTube and I watch The School of Life, and I forget about them.
Yeah, I appreciate School of Life, actually. I've watched some of their videos. They're good.
Yeah.
And they have, like, I mean, I listen to Jordan Peterson sometimes, you know, and I really appreciate some of the things that he has to say, obviously. And School of Life, different channels, right? And they do show you that, you know, everyone is dealing with something, like you said, and you're ahead of some, you're behind some, whatever. That's not the point. You know, the point is how you can become better than who you are yesterday. As cheesy as it sounds, it's what it is, you know.
And I would say it's like for some insecurities to you seem insecure, which is why you need to surround yourself with people who, you know, who know you.
Mm-hmm.
I read this beautiful thing yesterday underneath a YouTube video comment, and it said, you cannot read the label of a jar from inside the jar. That you can read the label of a jar from the outside, which is why you need people around you to kind of tell you like who you are, or like give you an inkling of, because they're the ones who can see you from the outside. So it could be an insecurity to you, but when you open up and you show the vulnerability and you're like, hey, I actually really don't like this about myself, and you speak to someone else about it, and to them it's like, hey, no, this is beautiful, and I always loved the fact that you did this, and I wish I had that. So it's really getting out of your own head.
That's a good point. And your analogy about the jar, it's also like when a fish is inside the water, like going along, it doesn't really have a concept of what water is because it's so submerged in that environment, right? So
For
you
sure.
need that like fresh perspective from outside to tell you, oh, it's okay, like it's fine, it's not as bad as you think, you know.
For sure.
Okay, so what are some red flags for you in relationships?
This is like in a romantic relationship or in a friendship or in a professional, like what?
It can be any. You can like talk about, let's say romantic. Yeah, let's just say romantic, intimate relationship. What's a red flag for you?
I would say red flag would be inflexibility. Life is so uncertain, and it really tests you, and it really like grinds you to the ground. And when you're not flexible, it'll hurt more because you're just being very rigid. So I think in friendships and in relationships, I think someone who is super flexible, someone who is inflexible would be a big red flag for me. And now someone else would completely like that. And of course, everyone knows like the big red flags of lying and cheating and blah 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 blah. But I think in that setting, the flexibility is not something you would know right off the bat. You would need to like know that person very well to know if they're flexible or not flexible in times of calamity. So to answer your question, my big red flag would be that someone who's just like, who like talks about all these things that they've done, and they're like constantly, they think that they're so great, and like they hype up things, and then you later realize like, oh, they're not even all that. So a big red flag would be someone who talks a lot about money, or like random achievements that are like so difficult to attain, or like anyone who's like really tries to pump up their ego. I think like if you're a great person, people should be able to tell that without you tooting your own horn. So I would say that would be my red flag upon first impression.
Okay, cool. So that, and also lack of flexibility, right?
Lack of flexibility, though, you can know from the very beginning. You would
Yeah.
only know after you maybe start dating the person, or maybe you know them after a while, and then you're like, oh, this person's really inflexible, and I'm not sure that's a right life partner for me, because not everything is sunshine and butterflies, and you kind of want your significant other to be like water, and to be smooth with the twists and turns of life.
Yeah, it's important. It's important to kind of flow as well, because you can't just be a rock, you know. You gotta kind of have some flexibility. Like you said, life throws a lot of unexpected things around, and you know, you gotta be able to flow with it. That's cool. And yeah, by the way, about tooting your own horn as well, that's another thing. I mean, if you are what you say you are, then other people have probably seen that as well, or seen at least a trace of that as well. So if you're constantly doing it to kind of blow up your own ego, then that's definitely something.
But then there's this other part of me that's like, oh, like this is just a child who needs attention and love, because I see everyone as children now. And when I see someone who's like, oh, I did this and I did that, and I was on a yacht with like this sheikh in the Middle East, and I did this, and I had dinner with like the Hiltons or whoever, and I'm just like, honey.
That's the problem, right? When you understand psychology, then you see people in a different light.
I know. And then I feel bad for them. And then I'm like, and then my humanistic side kicks in, and I'm like, but maybe I should see them another time. And I'm like, no, Mina, stop. No, 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 no. This is no, stop. This is not some sort of like humanistic project of yours.
Yeah, like I'm not like Oprah or Dr. Phil here trying to change people's lives. I'm trying to look for a partner here.
Yeah.
Cool. So if you wanted to, or if you could have lunch or dinner with someone dead or alive, who would it be?
Um, I thought about this question, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have this amazing answer. Truly, like that would be
Nelson
my
Mandela.
yeah, no, but then like, yeah, like someone who's like super, but then I was like, no, deep inside my heart, I'd love to just have lunch with Angelina Jolie. And I know that like she's an actress, and like, oh, that could be the very like me being so shallow, but it's really just like I want to talk to her about the kind of using her fame to do more like humanitarian work. And she's adopted children from all around the world, and of course she's in a very financially stable position to be able to have help and tutors and drivers and cooks and all of these things. But I think that just having lunch with her and like understanding her life, and maybe even wondering, is her life all that awesome as it is, or what is, so we don't know so many the stories and secrets of so many people. Like Paris Hilton just came out with a documentary, and everyone made fun of it before it came out until she watched it, until like people watched it and they're like, wow, like I feel so bad for judging her. So for me, it would be, I would love to have lunch and sit down with Angelina Jolie to
Yeah, I
learn
can
about
see that.
everything. Hollywood, her humanitarian work, adopting children, and her life with Brad Pitt, all of that.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I can totally see you vibing with Angelina Jolie. Because like, she kind of does like similar stuff as well, like going around traveling, meeting people, and you do the same. You're passionate about people. You want to understand different cultures. That's cool. I can see you vibing with that. That'll be a good lunch. What do you think is the most important invention of the 21st century?
The most important invention in the last few years has been Airbnb for me.
Okay.
It made travel for me highly more affordable.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed me to stay in people's homes. It allowed me to trust people. It allowed me to trust people's homes, and to provide a platform where local communities could earn a living by hosting travelers and tourists from around the world. I've stayed in some of the sickest neighborhoods that hotels would usually not even have permits. Like in Athens in Greece, I stayed in an anarchist neighborhood where officially the police are not allowed inside this neighborhood. It's called Exarchia. And I stayed in an Airbnb there where a hotel would usually not, for example, exist. So for me, the idea that you can go on your phone and find any person's home, sometimes you're even living, like in Germany, I stayed with a couple,
Mm-hmm.
and they had an extra room. And I know that my nightly fare is helping them pay with bills, and I'm happy, they're happy. We learn about each other's cultures. We cook together, and I think I love Airbnb, and I think it's solved a lot of problems in my life, and it's one of the best inventions in the modern sort of world.
Cool. That's that. I mean, yeah, I can see that. And the concept of hotels are really dying out. Hotels are not all that anymore, and they don't differentiate themselves. They're like a dying breed now. And
There's no soul in there.
no,
And every hotel room looks exactly the same, like
that's
every other hotel room. You have the standard styles sheets, standard set, and there's like random art that doesn't mean anything.
mhm.
And yeah, it's always in like a commercial area. It's very expensive. If you want to do laundry, you have to give it to the hotel to do it, and then they're going to charge you, I don't know, $10 per piece. It's like, no, that's not how real life is. And that's the thing, I kind of like to keep things real, and having that opportunity with an Airbnb and seeing the host, communicating with them, asking them how it's supporting. Sometimes it's helping people pay people's mortgages. Sometimes it's a single mom supporting her child. Sometimes, and I know there are a lot of people who talk against Airbnb, but for me, it's a winner in my eyes.
Mm-hmm. And they're going down right now, unfortunately, because of COVID. You know, that not a lot of people are getting it. But
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, it's it's an important thing in general. Like a sharing of resources is going to be the future. Whether it's cars, whether it's houses, or whatever else, right? Like Uber is a similar concept, right?
Right.
Or even like social media, Facebook, Instagram. You're sharing your content, your resources with other people, and it's just a win-win, like you said. They're
I
making
like
money,
that.
you know, they're making money, you're happy, and yeah, it's a win-win. Basically anything that, you know, is a positive sum game is good, right? Because it's gonna create the synergy where everyone grows. So, and that's the concept of barter as well. Back in
Mm-hmm.
the day, you know, you used to give your camel for someone else's milk or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And you guys both got what you wanted.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so that's that. Now, what about the future excites you?
I think ease, just facilitation. I think that so many things have become easier. Like every time I load dishes in the dishwasher, I'm like, can you imagine there was a woman sometime not that long ago? We're talking about 20 years ago, not that long ago. My mom had a dishwasher. She got her first dishwasher when I was like probably 4 or 5. And there was a woman who had to set aside time if she went to work or if she didn't go to work, just washing dishes, which is your everyday tools. And the fact that you can just put them in the dishwasher and go do something else, which could be towards your passive income, towards your education, read a book, investing in your mind, raising another human being. And I think that the facilities of the future really excites me. The fact that we're going to be able to have more time doing things that we love and making us happier, more productive, and more contributing human beings to our society.
I like that. And you raise a good point because, you know, with all of this, ideally we want to get there where with all of this automation, AI kicking in and machine learning algorithms helping us automate most of our manual tasks, that we get to a point where at least we have the time to do more creative work, or we have the time to actually help each other out or establish deeper connections or whatever it is, right? So that's
I think even with like raising children, I don't like the idea that you bring a child and then the child's kind of like dumped into a nanny daycare, or you dump your child in front of a TV and you're just, I think that I want to go back to the times where like there's focus, and if you're bringing a child, it's not someone else's responsibility to raise your child, and then you say, oh yeah, I have a photo of my child on my desk at work. So it's like, I feel like having more time to invest in younger minds, educating yourself also as well. I feel like if we could automate a lot of things while still having that passive income, you're able to put more quality time into our future generation, teaching them about stuff rather than letting them learn stuff from, I don't know, whatever their education system is teaching them about, or whatever is like they're watching on TV or whatever they're listening to. So I think that I truly believe that if you raise your children well and you invest the time into them, they will also be part of that new wave of contributing towards society.
I love that 100%. I'm with you on that. I think it's very important, like education, and especially being with your child at a very early age, because, you know, like from when they're born until they're like 4 or 5 years old, that's a very important part of their character formation, you know, and they might not even know that. But like you said, you know, when you get a child and then you go to work, you just have their picture in your
But they
wallet,
don't
right?
have a choice. And I totally understand that, you know, a lot of parents, like they need to go to work to be
Yeah.
able to pay the rent, and they need to be able to, and, you know, childcare is not affordable and all these other things are not affordable. And, you know, you have to put your child in front of the TV while you cook, because who's going to feed that child? So there is And we're also in a situation where we're not living in a village or in a big family unit before, but before you would give your child to your sister or your mother or your aunt, or someone would sort of be investing in that child at the same time. But now everyone is independent and you have to do everything on your own. So my hope is that the automation or of our lives and our jobs and making things more sort of will allow us to focus on the things that are more important, which is our human relationships, educating ourselves, educating our future generations, and taking care of the environment, and all of the things that we need to focus on.
I love that. 100 points for that answer. I love it. So, do you have any questions for me?
I do. I thought about this, and as someone who's now in the content creation world, and someone I work with content every single day, do you think that we're entering, or we already are, in an attention deficit sort of environment where everyone, whether it's you're a content creator or whether you're a company, it's like, what are people going to do to gain more attention? And it's like that race for more eyeballs, more views, more subscribers, and people getting more likes and being seen and being heard and being liked. And do you think that, like, are we in this sort of attention currency? Like, is attention our new currency? That's what I meant to say.
That's a good question, actually. I was listening to a podcast, Joe Rogan. He was interviewing this neuroscientist who was a professor at Stanford. And he was saying how right now, when we're speaking in the context of technology, humanity is in its adolescence stage, which means we have this very powerful tool in our hands, but we don't really know how we're using it and the effects that it's having on our societies and like the consequences that it's unfolding throughout. And this is one of the things, attention deficit. So I think that there's a problem with, like, there's a ground up, very basic fundamental problem here, which is the incentive system of social media. Monetizing businesses based on the number of clicks, hits, likes, and in general rewarding people based on how many likes they get, for example, or basically the quantity of attention that they receive. That in and of itself is a problem, because then it creates this whole system where you're attaching your self-worth or the value of your business to quantities rather than the quality of the content you're creating. And then basically, like, just looking at it in a high level, you see teenagers looking at videos that only last 7 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever. And this in and of itself is a problem, because we don't have enough attention to sit down and read a book. We don't have enough attention to sit down and have a meaningful conversation, dig deeper, whatever it is, right? And yeah, I do think it's a problem. And if we want to change it, we got to change the incentive system. We got to change the system from ground up. So rewarding quality over quantity, rewarding deeper conversations, rewarding basically outcomes that, like, basically rewarding outcomes that are beneficial for society as a whole, not just outcomes that are good for you as a person, like individual outcomes. Anyways, I think I went on a rant, but that's what I think.
No, I mean, these conversations, they're so open and they're so vast, and there's not really a way to solve it. But I just feel like attention feels so good. It's in our human nature. It's as you are as a child. When your parents give you attention, you love it. When you gain attention from your teacher, you love it. When you get attention from an opposite sort of sex or same sex or a loved one or someone you're attracted to, and attention is just so, it's tempting. So I don't know how we're moving forward now with this new, where everything is your brand and how many views you get, how many likes you get, how many followers you get. And it's all like, it's so connected to you and your ego, which is scary.
It is scary. I think that, like you said, fundamentally we all love attention, and it's not social media's fault, but social media is fueling the fire.
Oh yeah, totally.
You know, it's definitely like one right step that Instagram made forward in that regard is to remove the number of likes. You
Hmm.
know, I really think that's good. So now you can't really see how many likes another person got. You can see how many likes you have, but
Yeah, but you can still see how many likes you have, which is still like you're like, oh, am I only worth 44 likes today? Oh, but how come when I was wearing this top, I was getting 120 likes? So maybe I should be doing more of that. And then it's like, oh, I don't want to get into it, but it's
it's
I
weird.
know so I know so many people who stopped doing their art because they weren't getting enough likes, and they start putting more pictures of themselves and they got more likes, and then they started getting more likes when they started wearing more revealing clothes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then they went from full on artist like that was maybe doing leaf art or tree art or something very like completely non-human at all to bikini model, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah. That's the
So
incentive system, you know. That's and it's weird. Like I was listening to this interview and the guy was like, if aliens came down and they asked us who is the most famous person in the world, like let's say most famous female, how do we explain why, let's say, Kim Kardashian is the most famous person on, like, how do we explain that? It's just really weird, you know.
it is really weird, and I don't have a solution for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We can just wrap it up as it is.
Yeah, that's just what it is right now, but it will hopefully change for the better. Right now, this is just the experimental phase. I mean, social media is not that old anyways. Like
Hmm.
it's what, 15 years max, 10
Right.
years, 10, 15 years max. So we'll figure it out as we move forward, you know.
Hopefully.
Anyways, this was it, Mina. I really appreciate having you on, having
Thank you.
some good conversation, and
Thank you
thanks for
for
joining.
Thank you for having me, and I can't wait to see more of your interviews and learn more from your channel.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay.